If you want to make a man obsessed with you, you must first become the kind of woman who is not obsessed with him. Or most people believe that obsession is created by giving more time, more affection, more attention. But obsession, true obsession, is born not from excess. It is born from absence, from inner stillness, from what a man feels about himself when he is in your presence. A man becomes obsessed not when you flatter his ego, but when you make him question who he must become to stand beside you. And here lies the paradox. To awaken the deepest loyalty and longing in him, you must be willing to disrupt the part of him that seeks comfort over growth. You must be the mirror that reflects back his unrealized potential, not his polished pride. When you stop reacting to his ego, when you withdraw emotional permission from his lower self, he doesn't forget you, he replays you. And the more still you become, the louder your absence echoes. There is a silent force that drives nearly every choice a man makes, his ego. And while most people fear it, flatter it, or fight it, few understand its true nature. The ego is not the enemy. It is not even the truth of who a man is. It is simply a mirror, one that reflects back how he perceives his own worth in the presence of others. To influence a man's behavior, you must stop trying to manipulate him directly. Instead, understand what version of himself he sees when he is with you. If your presence amplifies the image he holds of himself as valuable, capable, admired, he will gravitate toward you, not because of you, but because of how he feels around you. Conversely, if your presence disrupts that image, challenges it, questions it, exposes its fragility, his ego will flinch. But over time, if he is a man of substance, he will not run from that reflection. He will obsess over it. He will seek it, not because it flatters him, but because it awakens something he has not yet mastered within himself. This is why some women are quickly forgotten and others, though they say very little, do very little, linger in a man's memory like an unanswered riddle. It is not what they gave, but what they reflected. There is a story often told in monasteries about a young man who seeks out a master after experiencing deep rejection from a woman he loved. He approaches the master and says, "She shattered me. Her silence, it was unbearable." The master replies, "No, her silence did not shatter you. It revealed the parts of you that were already broken." The young man grows angry. "So she's not to blame for my pain." The master looks at him and says, "Pain is a teacher. Do not blame the teacher for showing you what you still need to learn." This is the power of reflecting rather than reacting. When you stop personalizing a man's ego, when you see it as a mirror, not a master, you gain incredible freedom. You stop overcompensating. You stop shrinking to avoid conflict. You stop performing roles that were never yours to play. Instead, you become grounded, clear, calm. There's a quiet kind of strength in a woman who no longer dances for approval. She doesn't try to inflate a man's ego to make him stay, nor does she seek to punish it when he pulls away. She simply mirrors back whatever truth he is unwilling to face within himself, and that, paradoxically, is what makes her unforgettable. A man's ego, by design, resists what it does not understand. But once he begins to associate your presence with deeper self-awareness, something subtle begins to shift. He may resist at first. He may even retreat. But if he has the capacity for growth, your presence will plant a seed in his mind that grows quietly in his absence. He will begin to question himself, not in the way that weakens him, but in the way that evolves him. The greatest impact you can have on a man is not through your words, but through your state of being. You do not have to be loud to be heard. You do not have to be dramatic to be felt. You simply have to be aligned, inwardly still, emotionally sovereign, boundaried in your energy, yet open in your presence. When a man experiences this, he realizes that you are not seeking to control him. You are inviting him to meet you where depth resides. This requires discipline. It requires patience, and it requires emotional maturity, especially when his ego reacts with defensiveness, withdrawal, or false bravado. But if you respond with stillness rather than reactivity, you teach him something profound. You teach him that not everything is about him. You teach him that your peace is not a reaction to his behavior. It is your natural state, and that realization will unsettle him more than any accusation ever could. Reactivity feeds ego, but observation disarms it. This is where true power begins to unfold. The second teaching. Emotional non-reaction is not indifference. It is not coldness. It is not pretending not to care. It is choosing not to participate in the chaos of another person's inner storm. When you can stand still while someone else thrashes in emotional confusion, you become the grounding force they didn't know they needed. Think of a mountain. It does not lower itself to meet the clouds. It simply exists, solid, immovable, quietly aware. Storms may come, winds may scream, but the mountain does not shout back. It does not chase the storm. It endures, and by its very endurance, it becomes the thing others lean on when the winds become too strong. There is deep seduction in stillness, not because it manipulates, but because it reveals. When a man throws his emotional energy outward, through anger, silence, or detachment, and you do not match it with your own emotional chaos, something remarkable happens. His energy returns to him. He is left to feel the full weight of his own projection. And in that space, he is forced to confront it. This is the mechanism by which obsession forms. Not through control, but through inner mastery. There's a neurological process called mirror neurons, cells in our brain that allow us to mimic the emotional states of those around us. When you remain emotionally still, the person in front of you cannot escalate. His nervous system begins to co-regulate with yours. This is not philosophy. This is science. You calm him not by saying, calm down, but by embodying calmness. But here is the deeper layer. When you withdraw emotional reactivity from a man who thrives on ego reinforcement, you remove his ability to define himself through your response. He can no longer measure his worth by whether you chase, argue, or cling. And in that absence, he begins to seek a new mirror, either from within himself or once again from you. But this time, he must approach with a different energy, less performance, more presence. There was once a woman who dated a man very much ruled by his ego. He was charming, powerful, and deeply insecure. Whenever he felt her pulling away, he would flood her with affection. And whenever he felt secure again, he would withdraw. One day, she stopped reacting. She stopped trying to decode him, fix him, or soothe his ego. Instead, she focused on her breath, her posture, her internal stillness. She became rooted in herself, and suddenly, he became agitated, confused. Why wasn't she responding? Why wasn't she reacting? He came to her and said, "Do you even care?" She looked at him gently and said, "I care deeply, but I no longer react from fear. I listen now to what your energy says more than your words." He stood in silence, stunned. For the first time, he felt seen, not in the way that made him feel adored, but in the way that made him feel exposed. You see, to hurt a man's ego is not to insult him or belittle him. That's immature and unwise. To hurt a man's ego, if it is to have any transformational value, is to stand so deeply in your own truth that the false part of him has nowhere left to hide. You don't raise your voice. You raise your vibration. And in that elevation, he must choose to rise with you or fall away. But do not fear the falling away. That too is wisdom. Because the more you react from emotion, the more you blur the lines between what is yours and what is his. You begin to carry his insecurities as your own. You begin to walk through life adjusting your light so it does not offend his shadow. And this is not love. This is spiritual codependency. When you instead choose clarity over chaos, self-possession over performance, and silence over shouting, you reclaim a kind of power that cannot be taken, only recognized. There is an old Taoist phrase: when nothing is done, nothing is left undone. In relationship terms, this means when you stop trying to control how someone sees you or how they behave, you become free, and that freedom becomes your magnetism. A man who is truly meant for you will not need constant ego maintenance. He will not demand that you coddle his wounds at the expense of your own peace. Instead, he will be drawn to your stillness as a reminder of what is possible within himself. He will seek your presence not because it flatters him, but because it grounds him. And if he is not yet ready for that kind of growth, then your stillness will disturb him. But disturbance is not a bad thing. Many people awaken not through comfort, but through disruption. What happens when you withdraw emotional validation from a man's lower self? He will test you. He will poke at your boundaries. He will try to recreate the emotional drama that made him feel powerful in the past. But if you no longer feed that pattern, he will either evolve or he will exit. And both outcomes serve your path. Remember, love is not found in how much you bend. It is found in how deeply you are rooted. When the wind blows hardest, you will know you are growing when your calmness begins to unnerve those who once controlled you through chaos. This is not cruelty. This is clarity. And the man who learns to stand beside you without needing to dominate you, that is the man whose obsession will be rooted in respect, not possession. Let this be your practice, not to suppress emotion, but to master it, not to deny love, but to refine it, not to break a man down, but to rise so fully into your own presence that only the part of him worthy of you remains. And this is where the next teaching begins to unfold. In a world where attention is the new currency, understanding its role in the dynamics of desire becomes not only powerful, it becomes transformative. A man's ego does not feed primarily on love. It feeds on attention. It feeds on emotional response, on being seen, acknowledged, and validated. And when this attention is given without discernment, it loses its value. What is abundant rarely inspires obsession. It simply becomes part of the background noise of his life. But when your attention is withdrawn, not out of punishment, but out of self-honoring, you shift the very axis of the relationship dynamic. Attention is a form of energy. Where you place your attention, you place your life force. And when a man senses that your attention is no longer tethered to his behavior, he begins to experience a strange but deeply unsettling silence. Not a silence of sound, but of ego disconnection. That space, that absence, creates a vacuum. And the ego hates vacuums. It will rush to fill it with explanation, performance, or provocation. But if you have anchored yourself in emotional clarity, you will not rush to fill it with comfort. This is the moment when many women struggle. The impulse to explain, to fix, to reassure. It rises quickly, especially for those conditioned to keep peace through pleasing. But you must understand, in this moment, silence is not absence. It is instruction. It teaches him that your energy is not to be consumed mindlessly, that it is not on demand, that it is sacred. There's a story of a woman who once gave everything to her partner: time, praise, affection, devotion. He admired her, but never valued her. One day, she stopped over giving. She stopped explaining. She started simply being present in her own life. She began tending to her own soul instead of managing his emotions. And suddenly, he became attentive, curious, even restless. He said, "You feel far away." And she replied, "I am just no longer constantly arriving in your world. I am arriving in mine." Attention that is always given becomes invisible, but attention that is earned becomes a treasure. This is not about playing games. It is about restoring balance. When a man feels he has constant, unchecked access to your emotional energy, he may unconsciously devalue it, not because he is unkind, but because the human mind does not easily honor what it believes is permanent. In psychology, this is called hedonic adaptation, the tendency for people to return to a baseline level of contentment even after positive events. What was once exciting becomes familiar, and what is familiar becomes background noise. When you understand this, you stop over-explaining your worth. You stop rehearsing your value. Instead, you allow absence to do what presence could not. You allow silence to speak louder than your words. Men are not wired, biologically or emotionally, to pursue what they already believe they possess completely. When you remove the thrill of pursuit, when everything becomes known, predictable, instantly available, you eliminate the mechanism that triggers deep psychological attachment. Scarcity, when used with wisdom, breeds value. This is why obsession is often not about the person. It is about what they represent. If your attention becomes associated with emotional safety, inner challenge, and spiritual depth, it becomes more than desirable. It becomes necessary, and that necessity creates longing, not for what you do, but for who you are in his life. True feminine magnetism does not chase. It doesn't persuade. It doesn't prove. It simply invites, and then allows space for the man to choose his own alignment. And that space, that restraint, is what most profoundly influences him, because it is in the absence of your energy that he meets the weight of his own disconnection. And if he has the capacity, he will begin to shift, not to win you back, but to become worthy of your presence again. A woman's attention, when wielded with awareness, is the most shaping force a man can encounter. It either enables his comfort or activates his courage. And the difference lies in how consciously it is given. When your attention is reactive, based on his moods, his distance, his approval, you become emotionally enslaved to his rhythm. But when your attention is deliberate, anchored in your own energy, your own standards, you become emotionally sovereign. To reclaim your power in a relationship, you must understand that obsession is not created by giving more. It is created by giving wisely. Not everything you feel needs to be shared. Not every distance he creates needs to be bridged. Not every silence he offers needs to be filled. Sometimes, what he needs most is not more of you. It is more of himself. And your absence is the mirror in which he sees what he has been avoiding. This leads us to the deeper layer. Masculine obsession is not born from comfort alone. It is born from polarity, a delicate balance of emotional safety and inspired challenge. A man becomes attached not just to the woman who soothes him, but to the woman who stretches him, who calls him not with force, but with frequency, who says, through her presence, you may rest here, but only if you rise to meet the version of yourself I see in you. This is the secret tension that creates depth in relationships. Safety without challenge becomes stagnation. Challenge without safety becomes trauma. But when both exist simultaneously, when a man feels emotionally accepted and yet subtly called to rise, he develops not just affection, but devotion. Devotion is not built through appeasement. It is built through transformation. There is an ancient parable about a warrior who fell in love with a healer. She did not flatter him. She did not fear him. She did not try to tame him. She simply lived her life with such integrity, presence, and peace that he began to question the nature of his own strength. He asked her one day, "Why do you never try to win me?" And she said, "Because I do not seek to possess what I know is not ready to stay." He remained silent for days. And when he returned, he had laid down his sword, not for her approval, but because he realized he no longer needed it to feel strong in her presence. This is the challenge that inspires a man, not criticism, not comparison, but presence. A woman's presence that does not shrink, does not chase, and does not perform, but invites, quietly, calmly, relentlessly invites, not through words, but through alignment, through consistency, through boundaries, through love that is fierce not in tone, but in clarity. Men are wired, psychologically and biologically, to seek growth through resistance. In the gym, muscles are built through tension and release. In life, the masculine psyche is shaped the same way. He must feel the resistance of a woman's self, respect before he can grow into his higher self, not because she forces him, but because she refuses to enable the parts of him that are not worthy of her. This is why your energy must be clear. When you give attention to his lower self, to the version of him that seeks validation without vulnerability, you reinforce stagnation. But when you remove that attention, not from anger, but from awareness, you create space for his higher self to emerge. And in that emergence, obsession begins, not because you manipulated it, but because you created conditions in which he could evolve, and then tied your availability to that evolution. Let this be your quiet power, to see a man not as he is, but as he could be, and to refuse to settle for less, not through demands, but through direction, not through noise, but through stillness, not through control, but through conviction. Obsession is not created when you become small to fit into his world. It is created when you become so deeply yourself that he realizes he must expand to meet you. A woman who embodies both challenge and warmth, who does not collapse under emotional pressure nor weaponize silence, becomes a source of intense psychological contrast. And contrast is what the brain remembers. It is what the soul returns to. It is what the heart obsesses over. To cultivate this kind of emotional presence, you must be willing to walk alone if necessary. You must be willing to disappoint a man's ego in service of his soul. You must be willing to say, I see you, but I also see the parts of you that you avoid, and I will not participate in their reinforcement. That kind of love, strong, clear, and unshakable, is rare. And because it is rare, it is unforgettable. This kind of presence cannot be faked. It cannot be copied. It must be cultivated through inner work, breath work, stillness, self-inquiry, and the willingness to observe your own patterns. You must become fluent in your emotional triggers, so you are no longer seduced into performing old roles just to feel loved. You must know when to lean in and when to lean back, when to speak and when to pause, when to give softness and when to hold stillness. This is the art of feminine mastery, not to control a man's heart, but to guide it gently into coherence with your own energy. And coherence requires contrast. Imagine standing in front of a mountain lake. On one side, there is turbulent wind and choppy waters. On the other side, still reflection. If you wish to see your own face, you do not look to the chaos. You look to the calm. A man is the same. When your emotional presence becomes still and deep, he begins to see himself more clearly. And when he sees not only who he is, but who he could be, that is when true attachment forms. Not all men are ready for this. Some are too attached to their distractions, too committed to their comfort. But the man who is, he will return again and again to the woman who helped him meet himself more deeply. The obsession is not with the woman alone. It is with the version of himself she reflects when she stands firmly in her center. And so, you must remember, it is not your job to make a man desire you. It is your task to become so whole within yourself that his desire becomes a by-product of your presence, not the source of your identity. The next truth will emerge from here, and it will not come through force. It will come through frequency, through the subtle, quiet, irresistible energy that says, this is who I am, this is what I offer, and this is where I stand. From there, the dance continues. Your energy walks into the room before your words ever arrive. It speaks a language more ancient than speech, more consistent than appearance, more powerful than logic. A man may forget what you say. He may even forget what you do. But he will never forget the way your energy made him feel about himself, about you, and about the space you co-created in silence. What you allow, you teach. But even more than that, what you embody, you instruct. If your energy communicates insecurity, he will relate to you through uncertainty. If your energy is rooted in emotional hunger, he will reflect that same hunger back to you, either by avoiding it or exploiting it. But if your energy radiates self-respect, inner stillness, and calm clarity, you become a mirror through which he learns a new emotional language. One built not on fear, but on presence. This is not about pretending to be confident. That is simply ego in disguise. This is about becoming so inwardly aligned that your very presence becomes a boundary. Not because it repels, but because it filters. Your calmness filters out chaos. Your stillness filters out instability. Your grace filters out games. And the man who is ready for that will not just be drawn to you. He will be changed by you. There's a subtle, powerful intelligence to the body that cannot be masked. Your breath, your posture, your tone, these elements form your energetic blueprint. The way you carry yourself tells the world what you believe you deserve. If your shoulders are rounded with shame, if your voice trembles with the fear of being too much or not enough, if your eyes seek validation before grounding in their own gaze, then even in your silence, you speak of self-abandonment. But when you inhabit your body fully, when your breath is steady and your presence grounded, you teach others, especially men, how to meet you in a place of equal energy. You stop attracting what is chaotic because chaos has nowhere to root itself inside you. And what cannot root itself will eventually move on. There is a story often shared among the wise. A woman once came to a monk and said, "Why do I always attract men who disrespect me?" The monk replied, "Because you have not yet become too expensive for disrespect to afford." The woman looked confused. "But I do everything right. I love deeply. I give fully. I support endlessly." And the monk said, "Yes, but love without boundaries is not strength, it is supply, and supply without value becomes invisible." This is a hard truth to swallow, especially for those taught that goodness must always be loud or visible or constant. But in reality, true value is often quiet. It does not chase, it does not explain. It simply exists like a mountain, like the ocean, like a flame that needs no audience to burn brightly. The human nervous system is wired to respond to congruence. When your inner world matches your outer behavior, you become energetically coherent. This coherence is magnetic. It draws in people who are themselves seeking alignment. But when your words say, "I am whole," while your energy pleads, "Please choose me," there is incoherence. And that incoherence repels authenticity while attracting confusion. People will always meet you at the level of energy you hold about yourself. If you believe, even subtly, that love must be earned through suffering, you will unconsciously teach others to make you suffer before they love you. If you believe that peace is boring, you will draw in drama and chaos to simulate aliveness. If you believe that being needed is the same as being valued, you will find yourself in relationships where you are constantly overextending yourself just to feel seen. But when you begin to shift your internal posture, when you start inhabiting the truth that you are already whole, you send out a signal that is unmistakable, not loud, but steady. It says, "This is my standard, not just for how others treat me, but for how I treat myself." And that signal changes everything. A man will respond to your self-respect in one of two ways. If he is emotionally immature, he will feel threatened. He will try to undermine it, distract you from it, or make you question it. But if he is emotionally mature, if he is seeking truth more than control, he will rise to meet it. He will feel both safe and challenged in your presence. Not because you are trying to change him, but because your energy invites him to remember who he really is. This is not manipulation. This is mastery. And mastery begins in the body. You must understand, the body is not separate from your emotional energy. It is the transmitter of it. When you are afraid to speak, your throat tightens. When you betray yourself, your stomach churns. When you abandon your needs, your breath shallows. These are not accidents, they are messengers. And when ignored long enough, they become habits. Energetic habits that inform how people experience you. Start with your breath, slow it down, deepen it, let it drop into the belly. This alone shifts your nervous system from survival mode into connection mode. In survival mode, you seek to please, to avoid conflict, to chase validation. But in connection mode, you listen, you feel, you respond rather than react. Now observe your posture. Are you shrinking to avoid being seen? Are you leaning forward to chase approval? Or are you upright, relaxed, open, signaling both availability and sovereignty? Then your tone. Speak slowly, speak clearly. Do not rush to fill silence. Silence is your ally. It is not emptiness, it is space. And space is sacred. The woman who can sit in silence without panic is a woman who has befriended her own company. And a woman who enjoys her own presence becomes incredibly attractive. Not because she needs nothing, but because she has made peace with everything. The energetic foundation of attraction is safety. Not safety in the sense of protection from harm, but safety as in, I feel fully accepted in your presence. But acceptance does not mean tolerance. It means honesty. When a man feels that your energy is clear, that you will not betray yourself just to keep him comfortable, he begins to trust you. Not because you agree with him, but because you are true to yourself. And trust is the birthplace of obsession. Not lust, not admiration, but obsession. The kind that lives quietly in the corners of his mind long after you've left the room. The kind that is not born of drama or possession, but of reverence. This kind of energetic authority cannot be faked. Men can feel the difference between a woman who speaks boundaries but vibrates insecurity, and a woman who speaks softly but holds energetic certainty. The latter is far more powerful because her strength does not come from defense. It comes from embodiment. There's a woman I once knew who never raised her voice, never competed for attention, never explained herself. Yet in every room she entered, men noticed her. Not because she dressed to impress, but because she carried herself like someone who did not need to be chosen to feel complete. She walked as though she had nothing to prove, and so the world leaned in to prove itself to her. When you become still, deeply still, your energy begins to do the talking, and those around you will either harmonize with that frequency or fall away. Let them fall. You are not for everyone. You are for the few who can recognize what is rare. Energy is never neutral. It always communicates. If you find yourself repeatedly in relationships where your needs are ignored, where your voice is drowned out, where your worth is diminished, look not first to them, but inward. Ask yourself, what have I been silently agreeing to through my energy? You may find that your energy has been saying yes when your heart whispered no. That your body has been tensed with resistance even as your mouth smiled politely. That you have been performing peace while hosting quiet storms within. This is where transformation begins. Not in trying to change others, but in recalibrating your own frequency. In choosing, again and again, to return to stillness, to presence, to the truth of who you are before the world told you who to become. A woman in her energy does not need to dominate. She does not need to seduce through performance. She seduces through alignment, through devotion to her own rhythm, through the audacity to be herself even when others misunderstand her. This does not mean she never compromises, but she never contorts. There is a difference. Compromise is rooted in love. Contortion is rooted in fear. One builds bridges, the other builds resentment. So how do you begin to shift your energy? First, observe. Begin to notice how your energy shifts around different people. Do you shrink around certain men? Do you become overly animated, overly accommodating? These are signs that your energy is adjusting out of survival, not sovereignty. Then reset. Use your breath to return to center. Use movement. Walk, stretch, dance to bring yourself back into your body. Use stillness, meditation, reflection, silence to remember what you truly feel beneath the performance. And finally express, not with volume, but with clarity. Let your no be clear, your yes be whole, your maybe be honest. Let your tone carry your truth, not your fear. And when you do this consistently, you begin to reprogram not just your relationships, but your reality. Because reality, too, responds to energy. It reflects back to you what you believe you deserve. Not just consciously, but unconsciously. And when your energy becomes aligned with your worth, the entire field of your experience begins to shift. You stop chasing love. You become love. You stop proving yourself. You begin expressing yourself. You stop fixing others. You start healing yourself. And in that healing, your energy changes. Your presence changes. And the world begins to respond differently. People will treat you based on how your energy teaches them to. If you constantly forgive disrespect without requiring change, you teach them that your forgiveness is permission. If you constantly give more when they give less, you teach them that your love is conditional on your own self-neglect. But if you love with boundaries, if you give with awareness, if you speak with integrity, your energy becomes a force that reshapes the environment around you. Men, in particular, are sensitive to this. They may not articulate it, but they feel it. They feel when your energy is expansive or contracted. They feel when you are centered or scattered. They feel when your yes is rooted in desire or merely a survival mechanism to avoid abandonment. When your energy is clear, a man does not have to guess who you are. He simply feels it. And that feeling is what guides his behavior. You no longer have to teach him how to treat you with words. Your energy does the teaching. And so the question is never, why is he treating me this way? The real question is, what does my energy believe it deserves? From this awareness, the next path unfolds, and it unfolds not through explanation, but through elevation, through breath, stillness, and a quiet, unwavering decision to remember who you are, even when others forget. And as you return to that remembering, again and again, something powerful begins to shift. Not just within you, but in everyone who enters your field. There is a kind of power that does not announce itself with words, nor rely on performance to make its presence known. It enters quietly, not to be seen, but to be felt. This power is stillness. In a world obsessed with doing, responding, reacting, and explaining, stillness is not just a refuge. It is a force. It is a deep, rooted strength that unsettles the uncentered, intrigues the emotionally hungry, and awakens those who are truly ready for depth. Especially in relationships, stillness is not passive. It is strategic, deliberate, and magnetic. Most people have never truly experienced the weight of their own silence. They fill space with noise because emptiness terrifies them. But in the absence of words, what rises is truth, and the truth is often difficult to sit with. This is why silence, when practiced with awareness, becomes one of the most effective forms of emotional clarity. It reveals who is listening, who is performing, who is uncomfortable, and who is aligned. In silence, you discover not only others, but yourself. Many women fear silence in relationships because they equate it with rejection, with coldness, with emotional distance. But silence is only harmful when it is a weapon. When silence is intentional, not as avoidance, but as clarity, it becomes an amplifier of presence. It teaches you how to sit with the discomfort of not being validated, not being chased, not being instantly understood. And in that discomfort, you find sovereignty. The stillness we speak of here is not merely the absence of speech. It is the stillness of emotional non-reaction, the stillness of inner alignment, the stillness of not needing to fix, explain, or prove anything. It is the space between your trigger and your response. It is the moment where you could raise your voice, but choose to raise your awareness instead. When you are still in the face of emotional chaos, you become the grounding force in the room. Others may not recognize it consciously, but on a biological level, they feel it. The nervous system craves regulation. It seeks resonance. And when your energy does not escalate with drama, it becomes a lighthouse for those who are lost in their own emotional turbulence. This is not just spiritual. It is physiological. Mirror neurons in the brain respond to the emotional states of others. When you are agitated, the other person becomes more agitated. When you are calm, they begin to settle. But here lies the difference if your stillness is fake. If it is layered with suppression, resentment, or hidden manipulation, people will feel that too. True stillness has no agenda. It does not try to control. It simply is. In relationships, especially romantic ones, silence and stillness can shift the entire emotional landscape. A woman who does not chase answers, who does not demand validation, who does not attempt to force emotional closeness, but instead allows space, breath, and reflection, communicates a message far louder than words. I do not need to be seen to know my worth. And this kind of presence is deeply disruptive to the male ego. When a man expects emotional drama and receives calm detachment, he is forced to confront himself, not because you punished him, but because you did not react. You left him alone with the only voice he cannot escape, his own. That voice will do one of two things. It will seek escape, or it will seek growth. But both are revelations. Both reveal where he truly is within himself. There's a story of a woman who was constantly entangled in arguments with her partner. Every disagreement escalated. Words flew like daggers. Silence followed like a shadow. But one day, something shifted. She stopped engaging in the verbal warfare. Not out of defeat, but out of awareness. He expected a fight. She gave him presence. He expected accusations. She offered breath. When he raised his voice, she listened instead of defending. When he withdrew, she remained rooted instead of chasing. At first, he was confused, then frustrated. Then something remarkable happened. He softened. Without the stimulus of reactivity, he had to sit with the impact of his own energy. He had to meet himself. Stillness doesn't provoke change by force. It inspires it through reflection. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse or disrespect. It means you choose your response from a place of power, not pain. You communicate through clarity, not chaos. You withdraw not to punish, but to preserve your peace. And in doing so, you invite a deeper kind of relating, one where connection is not sustained by performance, but by resonance. Stillness as a strategy is not about withdrawal from connection. It is about withdrawal from misalignment. It is not about emotional withholding. It is about energetic refinement. You stop reacting to his every emotional shift. You stop adjusting your presence to his absence. You stop being the echo to his noise. Instead, you become the silence that asks, without words, what are you truly saying beneath all of this? This kind of woman is not easy to forget. Not because she is loud, but because she is rare. She does not perform to be loved. She does not explain to be understood. She trusts that the right man will feel her truth, not just hear it. And the man who cannot feel it, he is not ready. He is still in need of mirrors that reflect his performance, not his potential. Let him find those mirrors. You are not one of them. A woman rooted in stillness becomes a disruptor of unhealthy cycles. She does not play the role of rescuer, fixer, or emotional caretaker. She plays the role of herself, fully, unapologetically, quietly. Her silence is not absence, it is instruction. It says, this is the space in which you may choose to meet me or lose me, but I will not lower myself to be seen. This kind of energy changes relationships. Men become more introspective around her. They speak less to impress and more to connect. They slow down. They listen more. Why? Because she is not pulling at them. She is not demanding anything. And in that non-demand, their defense is lower. Their own stillness begins to emerge. Not all men are ready for this. Many are addicted to chaos, to emotional adrenaline, to the high of conflict and reconciliation. They mistake drama for passion. They believe love must be loud to be real. And when faced with a woman who does not rise to their chaos, they may feel abandoned. Not by her, but by the emotional games that once made them feel in control. Let them feel that loss. It is sacred. It is instructive. Stillness reveals truth, and truth reveals compatibility. When you embody stillness, you begin to see things more clearly. Not just in him, but in yourself. You see when you are compromising out of fear. You see when you are speaking just to fill space. You see when your silence is pure and when it is poisoned by pride or passive aggression. And from that awareness, you evolve. Because stillness is not just a tool, it is a practice. It must be cultivated daily, through breath, through intention, through the willingness to be misunderstood in the short term in order to be deeply respected in the long term. It requires you to release the need to be right, to release the need to be immediately validated. It requires you to stop speaking just because there is discomfort in the room. And it requires you to hold space for others, not by rescuing them from their feelings, but by trusting their process. This is especially important with men. Men are often taught to hide their emotions beneath action, withdrawal, or silence. When you react to this with fear or chasing, you reinforce his belief that vulnerability is dangerous. But when you remain still, present, open, yet boundaried, you create the conditions for his deeper self to emerge. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens in moments. Small, quiet moments. He says something unkind, you breathe. He withdraws, you stay present. He tests your silence. You do not explain. In these moments, your energy is louder than his voice. He begins to associate your stillness with safety, with clarity, with truth. And in a world where most people react out of fear, your refusal to react becomes a sanctuary. Stillness is not the same as silence. Silence can be empty. Stillness is full of awareness, of power, of calm certainty. When you speak from stillness, your words land differently. They don't just reach his ears. They reach his body, his heart, his breath. He may not even understand why, but he will feel the difference. He will feel that you are not speaking from need, but from knowing. And that knowing is what creates lasting impact. Many women believe they must explain themselves to be understood. But often, explanation dilutes clarity. The more you explain, the more you invite debate. The more you justify, the more you give away your center. But when you say less, with calm, clear energy, you invite reflection instead of reaction. There's a quote, "Speak only if it improves upon the silence." And in relationships, this becomes sacred. Let your silence not be passive, but instructive. Let your stillness not be retreat, but return. Return to yourself, to your breath, to your truth. Over time, a man begins to realize something about you. He realizes that your silence is not the absence of love, it is the presence of boundaries. That your stillness is not distance, it is discernment. That your emotional restraint is not coldness, it is wisdom. And if he is ready, if he is truly ready, he will lean in. Not to perform, but to listen. Not to control, but to connect. But he must come in silence too. He must meet you not with noise, but with presence. Because only in stillness can two truths recognize one another. Only in stillness can love be heard. Only in stillness can hearts return home, not to each other, but to themselves. From that place, something new begins, and it does not require noise to be known. It requires presence, attention, and a breath that says, "I am here," not to be rescued or chased, but simply to be seen as I am. This is the silent language of power, and those who are meant for you will hear it, not with their ears, but with their soul, and they will answer, not with words, but with their own stillness, their own breath, their own readiness. And the story will continue from there. When you understand a man's ego, not as a thing to control, but as a mirror reflecting your own energetic boundaries, a deeper kind of wisdom unfolds. You realize that obsession is never truly about possession. It is about presence. Not noise, but resonance. Not performance, but alignment. You do not need to shrink yourself to be adored, nor become louder to be heard. Your silence can speak. Your boundaries can lead. Your stillness can inspire. Your attention, when grounded in self-worth, becomes a sacred offering. Not a currency to be traded for affection, but a standard that teaches others how to rise into meaningful connection. Relationships, at their highest expression, are not games of strategy. They are echoes of inner mastery. They reflect your level of emotional awareness, your willingness to be still in the storm, and your quiet devotion to what is true, no matter who stays, who goes, or who chooses to rise with you. From this place, obsession becomes reverence, and love, no longer frantic, becomes peace.